So I've seen a lot of people on the internet asking for instructions for the metal looms, the magic squares, and I don't actually have the instructions for them, but I thought I would make a video showing you how to use them. There's probably a lot of methods on how to use them, but this is the way that I use them, and if anybody has a different method on how to use them, feel free to share that with me, because I am always looking for different ways on how to use them in different patterns. There are two different ways that I use them, but this is the way that I like to use it best. It's the pattern that I prefer the best. I don't really have fancy patterns or anything like that I use. This is just one that I prefer. So this is what the front of it looks like, and this is the back. These little things push in and out, and you're going to push them out so that these prongs stick out right here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your yarn, you're going to take about an inch or half an inch or so, you're going to put it on the back and just hold it there with your finger. And then what you're going to do is take the yarn and go from the bottom to the top. And these things like to push up and down, so you're going to have to make sure that the prongs stay out, because they like to push back in by themselves because they're loose. And go from the bottom to the top and just wrap it around and come back up and then wrap it around the top. And then you're going to go down again and wrap it around again. And you're going to do this twice. Just see. And you're going to do that twice. You can do it up to 5 times, but I don't find it necessary to do it 5 times. Twice is sufficient. But you have to do it at least twice, because if you only do it once, your little granny square that you're making will be too flimsy, and you won't be able to do anything with it, and it'll just completely fall apart, and it'll just be useless. So you have to do it at least 2 times. You can do it up to 5 times, but you're just going to be using more yarn than you really need to. So 2 times is enough, but you have to do it at least 2 times. So then after you do it the first time, then you're going to move on to the second prong, and you just go down and back up and down and back up, and you just continue with all of them. And then when you get to the end, you're just going to turn. When you get to the end, you just turn it. It's not really anything hard. And after you do that, you're going to keep this yarn attached and just pull a length out. And it'll be hard to gauge, because sometimes I pull too much out, sometimes I pull too little out. And you'll cut it, and then it comes with this little metal needle thing. And then you're going to thread your yarn through that. And then after you do that, what you're going to do is take it to the corner, right where you just finished winding it. You're going to take it to that corner, and you can see how there's, in this corner, how you have two underneath, the 2 rows underneath, and the 2 rows on the top. You're going to take this needle and you're going to go underneath the bottom and underneath the top. And you're going to go underneath it in a diagonal direction. You're just going to go underneath. Just like that. And then you're going to do it a second time. Just to get started. And the yarn will get stuck on these prongs, so you have to be careful of that because it'll completely shred up the yarn. Okay, and then after you do that, it'll make a little X over it, you can see. And then you're going to do it another time, but you're going to go in the opposite direction this time. You're going to go this way. You go underneath them. You're going to pull it back. And that's how you get started. And you only have to do it once. You don't have to go a second time over that one. Okay, and then you're going to just continue. Now you're going to go to the next side, underneath these two, to the right. In the diagonal direction, you go to the right, underneath both layers of yarn. You go to the right in a diagonal position. You go underneath it and to the right. You go once, and then you do it a second time to the right in a diagonal direction. You go to the right. Show you that word. And then you're going to do it again, but this time you're going to go underneath them and you're going to go to the left. And when you go to the left, you only have to do it one time. And as you're doing that, it makes little X's over it, and that's pulling this tight. And you just continue doing that the whole way around. So it's always in a diagonal direction underneath both layers of yarn, and you always go underneath both layers. When you go to the right, you do it twice underneath, twice to the right, and you only have to do it once to the left. Because when you go to the left, when you go back underneath it to the right, that going back to the right direction, that crosses it over and it makes the X. So that's why you only have to go to the left one time. So you go one, two to the right, one to the left. One, two to the right, and one to the left. Adjust my yarn. That's just, you just continue doing that underneath these, in the diagonal position, underneath both layers of the yarn. once to the left. And as you get further along in doing this, it'll become easier. My yarn's getting shredded up because I'm watching the video instead of watching my hands. And I keep getting caught on the prongs. But you're gonna get caught on these prongs. It's just going to happen because they're the whole way around it. And it's never gonna be perfect, but nothing that's handmade is ever gonna be 100% perfect. And as you practice, it'll get easier. And it's not hard by any means, but just with anything you do, it takes a few tries before it gets easy and you figure out how to do it. And this is going to be a long, boring video, but I'm going to videotape the entire process just so that you see step by step how to do the whole thing. Then you just turn it when you get to the next side and continue. And it's just a lot of redundancy. You just have to keep making these X's. But you just have to remember that it's always going underneath both layers. And it's just a top layer. It's just right here, just this one top, because there's a whole bunch of different layers of yarn, but you only want to go underneath this first one. And you go underneath that first one here to the right twice, and then after you go underneath that one twice to the right, you go underneath it once to the left. And it's just continuing. Once. And twice to the right. And then once to the left. And what's going to happen when you're finished doing this, these are going to end up being loops. And these loops are going to be what you use to tie your granny squares together, because this is going to be a square. And they're just granny squares, basically. And you have to just keep making them until you get the desired length of a chain, depending on how long you want the blanket to be. And then after you decide how long you want it to be, you make a second one, and then these loops, this is gonna be tight because of these X's. And what you do is you just take this this needle with the yarn, and you're going to just basically sew them together. You sew the chain together, and then when you have a second chain, you sew the second chain onto the first chain, and so on. And that's what we're doing right here, is making the loops so that you'll be able to tie the squares, the chains together. And it also is making it tight so that it won't unravel. I'm using baby yarn, so it's very fine, and it's getting really tattered very easily. Oops. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, and I didn't make necks on that last one. I guess I did. This yarn's so shredded I couldn't even tell. I sent it flying out of my hand. It's just a lot of redundancy, the first step of doing all of these X's the whole way around it. This is the most time consuming part of the whole thing. My yarn is so shredded right now. Keep doing this. It's always twice to the right and once to the left. That's all you need to remember when you're doing this. I don't know if you hear all of that racket right now, but that's my rabbit, and he's absolutely driving me crazy. He's making a lot of noise, and he's very distracting right now. Once you get into the motion and you're used to doing this, it won't take this long to even complete the square with these X's. I'm going a little bit slower than I normally do, just so that you can kind of see what I'm doing. It's not really that hard to do it, but just in case anyone hasn't quite grasped what I'm doing, which it's not really that hard, but I just want to make sure that people can see, just in case they haven't mastered it yet. But you can do it in one quick motion with the hand. You don't have to do it that slow. Once you're doing it a while, it's actually pretty quick. It doesn't usually take quite as long. The most time consuming thing is going around the square and just making sure that you don't get stuck on the prongs, like I keep doing. Once this is completed here, the square itself is going to be completed in just a couple of minutes. This part here takes the longest. It's easier actually to do it if you kind of hold it this way, because it stops from getting stuck on these. But I'm trying to do it as flat as I can so that you can see what I'm doing. It's kind of hard to do it this way because I keep getting stuck on the prongs. But when you're doing it, you're going to want to do it in a more upward position, because when you're doing it like this, you can see, you won't get stuck when you're doing it like that. See? It goes much smoother. You won't get stuck. It doesn't get stuck. But I'm trying to show people how to do it, so that's why I'm holding it flat. But when you're doing it, you're going to want to hold it in an upward position because you're not going to get stuck on the prongs as much. Okay, so we're on the last one, and I'm going to show you how to finish this. Now, you can see you have all these lines. And this here is just these squares we did. These are the borders. So this here, this doesn't count as a line. We don't count that as a line. We only count the insides as lines. So we count from twos. It's always two. So you go 1, 2, and then on the inside there's 2. So you go 1, 2 here, and 1, 2 here. And we're doing the exact same thing that we just did. We're going to take the needle, and we're going to go underneath in a diagonal direction, underneath, and we're going to go to the right underneath the 2, and we're going to come up. See? Underneath the 2 on the top and underneath the 2 on the bottom, we're going to come up right behind the 2. See? We're going to go just exactly what we've been doing, but now we're underneath the ones on the bottom here. So you go underneath it, and then we do the exact same thing. We go underneath it again twice. So it's the same exact thing. It's twice to the right, and then we're going to go right here. We're going to go underneath it, and it's once to the left. It's the exact same thing we were doing. Then you can see right here, there's 2 more. 1 here and 1 here. Now we're going from these 2. And we're going to go underneath in the diagonal direction to the right, up underneath these 2. You're going to go once to the right, and you're going to go twice to the right, and then you're going to go once to the left in the diagonal position. See? And then there's 2 left. And you do this exact same thing. It's just doing the exact same thing we had been doing. You go once to the right, you go twice to the right, and then you go once to the left. Just repetitive. And then you turn it. And then there's these 2 here. 1 here and 1 here. These 2. And you just keep doing it over and over again. You go once to the right, you go twice to the right, and then you go once to the left. And there's 2 left. You go once to the right, twice to the right, and then once to the left. And then you turn it. And it's the same. It's just the same thing over and over again. So then there's these 2 here. And you just keep doing it over and over again until you go the whole way around. Once. Twice. And you go to the left. And then you have this one here. You can see. It gets easier as you go. It gets clearer to see what you're doing because they start getting smaller. Once to the right, twice to the right, and then once to the left. And then once we do that, there's only 1 left. Went the whole way around. You go once, you go twice, and then you go once to the left. Actually, when you do it that time, you can bring it down a second time if you want to secure it better. Okay, so when we do all of that, you can see my threads my yarn's kind of shredded, so it's not as neat as it should be, but you get the basic idea of how it looks. It'll look better than that normally. Right here is the middle. And what we're going to do at the middle is we're going to take this, wherever your end is, and you're just going to crisscross over it. Just going to go down a diagonal. Just going to, my yarn is stuck. Just going to go down. And you can just keep going in the same position if you want to, but I like to crisscross over it, but it doesn't really matter how you do it. And I like to do it a few times just because I like the center to be more secure because it's the middle. And you just keep going over it. And make that center kind of have a little bit of a thicker knot in the center. You just keep going over and over again in the middle. It's kind of self-explanatory. You don't really need to see how to do that part. And then when you feel like you've gone over it enough, you just knot it off. This is going to be a really sloppy one because I've really shredded up my yarn. Cut it off. And then this is the back of it, and these just push in, and then the square comes off, and this is what it's left with. And these are the loops I was saying. You have these little loops here, and then when you make as many squares as you want to, you're going to take that metal needle and yarn, and you're just going to use these to essentially sew your squares together. And it doesn't really look like much right now, but once they're all sewn together and you have a whole bunch of them, it actually makes a really pretty pattern. This one's a little bit shredded up because my yarn got it kind of funky, but it does make a really pretty pattern. It's kind of hard to tell right on this video, but it makes a really pretty pattern, and it makes a really pretty afghan. I've made quite a few of them. So that's how you do that. I don't know if I helped anybody or if I just made things more confusing for people, but if you have any questions, I will try to answer them. So there you have it.